We're going to talk about the price of groceries first and whether people are being gouged when they go to the till. Jennifer Whitmore, the Social Democrat TD for Wicklow, is with me. Jennifer, people will remember Neil Richmond with his previous ministerial hat on, the Fine Gael TD, called for a review of grocery prices during the inflationary spike a couple of years ago. You're now calling for, you've brought forward a motion that would go further than that for a review. What have you asked for?
Yeah, so Social Democrats today in the Dáil, we called on the government to essentially make public the profits of the large supermarket giants so that there's transparency in what the profits are and that we can really start looking to tackle to see whether or not there is actually price gouging. You're correct. 2 years ago in 2023, Neil Richmond, talked very tough with the supermarkets, brought them to a meeting, said that they were going to have to step up to the plate. And we have seen nothing come out of that other than prices continuing to go up. We're at a stage now where families are paying 3,000 more a year on groceries than they were in 2021. And I think any of your listeners will know that, whenever they go into the shop, you could spend €50 and essentially carry out in your hands what you've bought for €50. So prices are going up and up, and we have not seen any measures being put in place by government to try tackle this. And I suppose the Social Democrats came up with a number of proposals. The principal one is making public the profits so that we can understand exactly what's happening within the retail sector.
We do know the profits of some of them. Like Musgrave, say the big Irish group, I think they had about €100 million maybe in profits last year. They had a massive turnover of 5 billion. So there is reporting that goes on. Now Tesco, for example, we don't know what they make in Ireland because it's treated as a kind of a group with the UK, and there's not a split or a division made in their reporting. So what extra obligation would your motion place on the grocery retailers?
Well, I suppose it's so that it's not a voluntary thing that the supermarkets do themselves, that actually there's a requirement placed on them to publish. The same way in the UK, they have to publish the profits. And as you said, like sometimes the supermarkets over there will publish, but they'll sort of bring in the Irish arm of the retail into it, so that separation doesn't happen. So one of the things that we also called for is that they would have to spin out and actually publish the Irish profits, because I think it is really important that we have that market data available to us, because we're never going to be able to address the problem unless we know what the problem is. So we need to be able to measure it in order to bring in any actions on it.
And I mean, is it your kind of working theory that there is price gouging going on?
I would suspect. I mean, that's what I think. I can't say for definite because we don't have the data. The CCPC, did look at this previously and essentially said, look, there's nothing to see here. But that's because they also don't have enough teeth and they don't have enough ability to compel businesses to do certain things. And that was another aspect of the motion, that we need our regulators, the Agri-Food Regulator and the CCPC. We need them to have sufficient enforcement and sufficient teeth that they can actually deal with this. And both of those regulators have requested from the government that they be given the proper powers. And government haven't done it yet. So that is another big issue. I just can't understand. We listened today to the ministers telling us, we hear what people are saying. We know things are really expensive. We know it's really hard, but they're not putting in place any measures that can actually address it.
Is there not every possibility that what we'll learn is that actually the reason that the food prices continue to rise are because there's just increased input costs for everybody along the chain? For the farmers at the start of it, to the processors, to the manufacturers, to the retailers at the end, they all have increased input costs, be they energy costs or fuel costs or labour costs or anything else.
And I do think that that's part of it. I do think we have seen higher input costs, but we need to have the facts in front of us, because unless we have the facts and the data, we're not actually going to be able to deal with this. And I know the Agri-Food Regulator is looking at that sort of really from farm to fork, food supply chain, what costs are there and who's making money at those different levels. But we need the supermarkets to be part of that, and they need to be compelled to actually provide that data.
And you say supermarkets. I know the motion is with regard to kind of supermarkets, retailers who've got an annual turnover above 10 million, of a certain size. Vincent Jennings is with us. He's the CEO of the Convenience Stores and Newsagents Association. Vincent, is there a value in this, do you think?
Good morning. Good afternoon, Kieran. Good afternoon, Jennifer. Most likely is, but it would have been useful had there been some consultation or discussion beforehand with the retail trade, because until such time as the manufacturers and the distributors, the agents, the wholesalers and the suppliers are all brought into this, and that we understand that, if you're talking about grocery retail, there are no grocery retailers in the country. There are retailers who sell, amongst other things, groceries, but our members would also sell and these would impact upon their overall turnover, fuel, which has massive amounts of excise on it, and tobacco and alcohol and lottery. And it would be very easy for an independent, I guarantee you this, for an independent retailer to have what would be considered by some to be turnover in excess of 10 million. And yet at the same time, I understand that Jennifer, because I watched the Dáil today, and I saw she name-checked a number of companies, and our people were not involved. But we would be caught up in this. So it's really important that you understand that if you are going to talk about turnover, and there's no way, by the way, that in the revenue or through audited accounts, that you can actually distinguish what is grocery and what is not grocery. You can't distinguish it by the way the VAT is allocated, and you can't distinguish it by way of the published audited accounts. So I fail to see what benefit it would have merely to show what the person's profit is, because you don't know whether or not that has come from the sale of other products such as clothing or fuel or groceries. So, there's definitely a need for transparency, but it is across the entire board, upstream in particular, and be understanding that our members would never ever have put up any prices unless the wholesale price has been delivered to us at a higher level than that it was previously.
Jennifer, is that a shortcoming, the fact that most retailers are mixed?
No, look, I think it's important to have the discussion. So, I mean, that's why the Social Democrats brought this today. I mean, there's 5 very large supermarket chains in Ireland. The retail sector is worth something like 15 billion a year. So there's really big players here. But I mean, if this is something that the government would take on board, I mean, obviously they would have to have discussions, there would have to be consultation, and the sort of the technical aspects of it would have to be dealt with. But what we wanted to do is just have that discussion and say, why are you not ensuring there's transparency, particularly with these really large companies and their profits? It happens in the UK. The government has repeatedly said they were going to tackle this issue. Well, we want them to do it. We want them to actually put the steps in place so that we have the data, we have the information, and that measures can be brought in to help families, because families are really, really struggling at the moment.
A lot of people getting in touch with examples of it. The price of beef coming up by a few people. It's gone up in all shops by 35%. How is it possible? Just as an example, Tesco finest mincemeat went from €4.50 to €7 per 500 grams in the last month, says somebody. And another listener wants to bring up dairy milk. The price has gone up €2.50 for the 8 square bar. What a disgrace. They say 087 1400 106 if you've got examples, egregious examples you want to share. But the price of beef having gone up 35%, Jennifer, I guess that speaks to my point about the input costs, going right back through the chain, doesn't it? Because, I mean, the price paid at the mart has gone up more than 35%.
Yeah. And I think, look, my feeling on this again would be that the producers aren't getting more money out of this. That what happens is that the input costs are it's more, and that there is the sort of middlemen along the way are making more money. And I would see the supermarkets as part of that as well, So, look, it's about bringing transparency to it, seeing exactly what the issue is, and then working to see what measures we can bring in.
Vincent, is there a way that we could introduce a level of transparency that might be workable, given some of the shortcomings you've highlighted?
Yeah, I've no doubt that it could be, but can I just go back on one thing insofar as that Jennifer has quite rightly identified a number of large supermarkets, but she also name-checked SuperValu. SuperValu is a collective of independent retailers. They're not a separate, though it is a brand. They're all individual and independent retailers, many of whom are members of ours. And certainly you wouldn't be expecting them to publish their accounts in the same way as you would expect Tesco and Dunnes.
Okay, but on the issue of how you might make a system that is transparent, that allows for some of the shortcomings you talk about, the mixed retail reality.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be the CCPC that will do it. It's not going to be them, because that's not their bailiwick, and it's going to have to be some other government quango to actually investigate this and to actually be able to actually identify if there is unacceptable price increases and I'm not talking about bringing back the Prices Act or the Prices Order, but certainly if there is to be the case, we'd all society would benefit from that. But it's not going to be the CCPC.
Give us a sense, Vincent, of the degree to which your members are dealing with their own price increases. Not the prices, not the stickers they're putting on products, but the things they pay for.
Every last thing that is the subject of all the phone calls and all the messages coming into you, I mean, including the Cadbury's 8 Square, there would have been 3, if not 4 increases over the last 3 or 4 years on that product. None of which we were able to hold on to. We all had to pass it on, but we didn't pass it on anything other than in the same pro rata level as it was put into us, because our costs have certainly not gone down, the cost of all the other things. But we want to remain in business, and we cannot afford to gouge or abuse our customers. We need them so badly. And to be perfectly honest with you, that would be the attitude of the vast majority of Irish retailers. We're not in the business of actually doing over our customers. We most certainly respect them far too much.
Jennifer, this isn't necessarily an argument against transparency. It's more an observation, but you speak to food economists, and one of the things they say, and this will be kind of sobering for everybody listening, is that actually we had a period where food was probably too cheap. It was abnormally cheap. And what we're experiencing at the moment is the new normal.
I think what we need to look at is what food we are eating. I think there's a lot of products perhaps that they're not good from a health perspective. But it's one of those issues. We have a lot of families who are really struggling to put food on the table. And I think Bernardo's, their report has said 4 out of every 10 parents, and this is nationwide, this isn't just Bernardo's clients, 4 out of every 10 parents will skip a meal in order to feed their child, right? So if you're looking at those kind of statistics, there is a huge problem for very many families in the country. And it's not the case that they're eating too much or they're eating the wrong kind of products. Prices of the very basic things, so we're talking about like bread, milk, pasta, they are all, the price of them is going up and up and up, and people are really, really struggling. So I think it is important, like I do the work that the agri-food regulator is going to do, that is really welcome, because it's looking at the whole supply chain. And I do think we need to start, I suppose, recognising where food is coming from and the environmental costs of different elements of food as well. If we're bringing apples in, say, from South Africa versus apples that we could be growing here in Ireland, I do think we need to have that conversation about food security, where our food is coming from. And for me, the best place for our food to come from is within our own counties or within our own countries, and we need to start supporting farmers to diversify into those kind of products. So I think it is a much wider conversation. But I think if you bring it back to the very, very basic stats of the number of families who are struggling at the moment, the number of children who are in consistent poverty, the number of people who are worried about food prices, there is a very, very significant problem, and it is a problem the government continues to ignore. And I think it's time now that they actually take their head out of the sand and start dealing with it.
That's well for you. You'd just be eating lamb in Wicklow. I mean, up in Monaghan, they'd be living on a diet of mushrooms and
Is this where I
stones.
say I hate lamb?
Oh my God.
I can't, yeah. No,
remember now,
if
Jennifer
I do
loses her seat at the next election.
Love beef, and I have
that clip.
I have very good local butchers that I go to. But no, lamb wouldn't be my thing at all.
We have a text in here from someone I suspect is a farmer or closely related to a farmer. The public have no respect for those that supply their food. They've been brainwashed into demonising farmers while the entire diet comes from plastic bags and containers. The savage hatred for farmers that's perpetuated by the government and media every day is insanity. As a result, we have a large amount of people attacking farmers and food producers online every day when they're within a few hours of eating food produced by those same farmers. Some people inhabit a world that is different to the real one. Another listener says, not only are prices going up, Kieran, sizes are getting smaller as well. Yes, shrinkflation is a thing.